We need the most ambitious budget in modern history. That's according to members of the Federation of Small Businesses, who have found that 1 million small businesses across the UK have been entirely excluded from government support measures. They've launched their 2021 budget submission today, and they're asking Chancellor Rishi Sunak to use his budget next month to address the gaps in business support. Hi everyone, I'm Martin Bamford, a chartered financial planner, personal finance YouTuber and money author. On this channel, I talk about personal finance, investing and happiness. Please do press on that little red subscribe button now. Become a part of our subscriber community here on YouTube. Welcome aboard. I want to take a look in this video through the budget submission from the Federation of Small Businesses, along with research which is based on their analysis of government data. It found that 56% of the workers who have been furloughed to date are employed outside of the sectors which seem to be getting the most attention, so retail, leisure and hospitality. And while on the face of it, that sounds like existing support measures from the government are not being particularly well targeted, the FSB points out that this is about supply chains, who are intrinsically linked to those key sectors. They give examples of suppliers to hotels, restaurants and event venues. And it's members of those supply chain businesses within those supply chains who seem to be commonly excluded from government financial support measures. According to the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, there are 5.9 million small businesses here in the UK. And the FSB survey, which looked at more than 1,000 of those small businesses, found that 22%, or more than 1 in 5, say they have received no financial help at all from the government since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. In a separate piece of research from the FSB, they found that 51% have been able to access a cash grant, but only 5% have received any discretionary help from their local authority. These discretionary help schemes are always a little bit worrying when they were first announced. They're funded by central government, but it's down to local authorities to apply their discretion to provide cash grants to businesses that fell outside of the remit of the main government grant support schemes. So while the government were quite clearly defining who would be entitled to cash grants under the main support schemes, the discretionary help schemes were far more locally applied. And therefore, there was a lot more in the way of discrepancies between the two who did and didn't qualify for support in different local authority areas. Based on the FSB survey result of 22% of businesses saying they've received no financial help at all from the government since the onset of the pandemic, and then the 5.9 million small businesses across the UK according to those BEIS figures, that suggests that more than 1 million small businesses and sole traders have been left without any direct government financial support. This new research from the FSB also looked at the burden of rising business rates on small businesses. 34% of small businesses have experienced a rise in their rates bill during the past 5 years. 1 in 10 said their rates bill has increased by a lot. Only 8% have experienced a reduced rates bill in the past 5 years. As a result of this combination of factors, the impacts of the pandemic, the lack of government support, increasing costs, small businesses have reported that 52% have experienced reduced profits, 17% have reduced their investments, 14% have increased their prices for customers, and 14% have reduced their numbers of staff. So as a result of this new survey from the FSB, they are calling on the Chancellor, on Rishi Sunak, to take several actions at his budget on the 3rd of March. They want to see business rates relief extended, and they also want to see cash grants and other support for members of the supply chains who have been excluded from support to date. They also want to see more financial support from the government for directors and the newly self-employed. So just to look through those requests from the FSB, they're calling on the Chancellor to firstly extend business rates exemptions. These were introduced back at the start of the COVID-19 crisis, and the FSB wants to see them extended through until 2022, as well as making a permanent change to the rateable value ceiling for small business rates relief. At the moment, I think that ceiling's around £15,000. They want to see that ceiling go up to a threshold of £25,000 on a permanent basis. The FSB also wants to see the Chancellor introduce a new retention bonus for those employers who bring back members of staff from furlough. And before the furlough scheme, this coronavirus job retention scheme closes, they want to see a reduction in national insurance contributions, as well as creating some support mechanisms for people who are either out of work or thinking about starting a new business. Another request from the FSB is to extend the flagship support schemes to cover the full periods over which any restrictions are in place. Of course, right now, we don't know for how long these restrictions are going to stay in place, either the national lockdown or then a series of local restrictions. We might be going back to the tier system we had before Christmas. We get to hear from Boris Johnson on Monday about his roadmap out of this crisis, and it could tell us a little more. But while there are restrictions in place, businesses just can't return to a proper trading environment. They can't get back to normal, which is why the FSB here is asking the Chancellor to extend his support schemes to make sure they cover these full periods during the restrictions. On the self-employment income support scheme, the FSB wants to bring into scope 2019-2020 tax returns. That would allow more self-employed people, new self-employed people, to qualify for the next round of grant funding under the self-employment income support scheme. They also want to see the introduction of a director's income support scheme, something I've covered in a previous video as a proposal, so I'll link to that video up here somewhere. This would align limited company directors who currently don't get any support with the self-employment income support scheme for self-employed people, for sole traders. One perennial issue experienced by small businesses is late payments for invoices, and the FSB is asking the Chancellor to reinvigorate efforts to end the UK late payment crisis. The concern here is that firms that start to trade again this summer may not get paid by larger businesses until the autumn, because big businesses can often take a very, very long time to pay invoices to smaller companies. So the specific action they want the Chancellor to take is to strengthen corporate audit committees to take action against poor practices, which apparently are being made worse during COVID. Another proposal from the FSB is to build on pay as you grow, to move the UK small business community out from under an unsustainable debt mountain. They want them to consider tax liability and employee ownership models. Small businesses have borrowed an awful lot of money to get them through this pandemic. So as well as the government financial support schemes that have been in place for some of those who qualify, they've been accessing things like bounce back loans. And we're starting to get close now to a time when those bounce back loan repayments will start. But pay as you grow will allow a bit more time, a bit more flexibility to start making repayments based on profitability. And then finally, the FSB wants the Chancellor to provide a roadmap to reopen the economy, which encompasses measures to facilitate digital adoption investment and upscaling within small firms. So this is all about building back better for the future. FSB National Chairman Mike Cherry said the Chancellor's plan for jobs will only succeed with the right plan for businesses. Firms need help to bring furloughed workers back in the near term, alongside long-term measures to help them manage the ongoing impact of lockdowns. While the government rightly moved at pace last spring to deploy business support, we can now see the shortcomings of a sector and property-based approach. Small firms which sell to other businesses outnumber those which sell to consumers 3-1. Thousands don't have a commercial premises or neatly fit the definitions of retail, leisure and hospitality. Too many have been left out of support measures as a result. We urgently need to see support measures extended to the hidden heroes within our supply chains who tirelessly drive our economy forward. It's not too late to bring those left out into the fold, but the Chancellor needs to act fast. There's a lot of common sense in this submission from the FSB. Small businesses really have suffered throughout the pandemic, and in many cases they have been entirely excluded from government financial support. Apart from the ability to furlough staff in some cases, there are many small businesses that don't qualify for any support by virtue of being limited companies, so limited company directors don't qualify, by not having premises with a rateable value, or by having to rely on local authority discretion to receive a cash grant. I think it's important that the FSB has identified here businesses in the supply chain for those closed down sectors, retail, leisure and hospitality, because they do appear to have been widely overlooked. There's a reasonable expectation, I think, that Chancellor Rishi Sunak, in his budget on the 3rd of March, is going to take further action to support the UK economy, to support these businesses. We've seen today the latest official borrowing figures, and that shows that the government borrowed £8.8 billion last month in January. That's the highest January borrowing figure since the records began back in 1993. And it's the first time in a decade that the government's had to borrow more in January than it collected through tax revenues. January is a significant month when it comes to these public borrowing figures because it's when self-assessment tax payments are made. So it's usually a real boost to the government coffers because so many taxpayers are putting money in. However, this time around this year, tax revenues fell by around £1 billion, but the government spent £19.7 billion more than it did in January last year, spent it on its support measures, including, of course, the cost of furlough. So Rishi Sunak has got a significant challenge ahead of him when it comes to this budget. He has to strike the right balance between repairing the public funds and providing continued support because we're still in this pandemic. We're still subject to a national lockdown. We may well hear from Boris on Monday that there's a roadmap out of that lockdown, but I don't think any of us are expecting that to happen overnight. It's going to take months months potentially before we get back to any semblance of normality. So now is probably not the right time for Rishi Sunak to be hiking taxes to try and repair the balance sheet. It is time to continue with existing government support measures and also make investments for rebuilding the economy. Once the lockdown is over, once local health restrictions are removed, we need to build back stronger. What do you think of the Federation of Small Businesses budget submission and their proposals? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that Chancellor Rishi Sunak is going to start raising taxes in the budget next month, or will he wait a bit longer and instead extend existing government support measures? I'd love to know what you think on that one. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, I'm Martin Bamford, and remember, when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.